Well, back now to our main story tonight. The murder of Stephen Lawrence prompted soul-searching far beyond the Metropolitan Police. The main recommendations of the Macpherson inquiry addressed unwitting discrimination and was seen as an important way of ensuring a fairer society. But, as our special correspondent Kurt Barling reports, many of those instrumental in pressing for the inquiry fear the initiative has been lost.
Stephen Lawrence's murder and police failures sent a powerful message that all walks of public life would have to re-examine their approach to race and inequality.
The investigation was marred by a combination of professional incompetence, by institutional racism, and
for those campaigning against racism and for fair treatment, it promised a new dawn across all public services.
Delivered the inquiry, Britain was transformed forever. In terms of acknowledging the subtle forms of racism, not just in the police force, but right across our institutions.
Macpherson was the latest in a line of reports stretching back to the 1960s. It raised expectations, promised change.
The story of the police abuse of power in the relations with black people was not new. We all had experiences of that before. There was a judge saying, on the basis of all the evidence, these are my conclusions, and therefore the police need to take a look at themselves, and indeed the government should make sure that the police take a look at themselves.
But Simon Woolley, now a commissioner for the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, saw engaging with the system as the best route to sustainable reform.
Initially, before Macpherson, we'd be looking at our democratic institutions. We need more black MPs, we need more black councillors. But very shortly afterwards, when we saw how broad the problem was, we said our second target must be the criminal justice system.
And so the work on reforming public institutions began with a blizzard of recommendations. Then this happened.
We had the war against terrorism, which started to say we need to focus on faith and other issues and forget about race equality. In fact, race was yesterday's agenda. We're now into faith. And so we've had a series of bombshells hitting the approach to taking Macpherson seriously, which meant it dropped down the agenda. And at some stage in the last few years, it's falling off the agenda completely.
For Professor John, this summer's rioting once again raised the spectre of unfinished business.
How can you say we have reformed the police, we treat communities differently, etc. We know all about community engagement, and yet we have this massive gulf in understanding between the police and young people, that you have the situation that effectively gave rise to the riots in Tottenham in August of this year.
For many involved in the equalities field, the legacy of Macpherson is not yet secure.
I think the establishment and the state didn't have a problem in saying black Britons are here, they need the protection of the law, they need to be treated equally and fairly. But it was a question of, well, what are you doing to make sure that happens? And it wasn't happening, and it still isn't happening now, even though there was a spell around the beginning of this century where we thought we'd made the breakthrough with the Macpherson report.
Stephen Lawrence's murder 18 years ago arguably changed public sensibilities on racism. But whilst a jury has finally delivered its verdict at the Old Bailey, questions remain about whether the legacy of the Macpherson inquiry has endured. Kurt Barling, BBC London News.
All right, let's get a check on the weather now with Wendy. And Wendy, it has calmed down a little bit, hasn't it?